Let's take it across to Mrutyunjay Mahapatra, MD and CEO at Syndicate Bank, joining us on the phone line. Mr. Mahapatra, afternoon. If you could just help us understand how exactly does this really tie in with banks? Because a total of 105 lakh crore rupee worth of projects against 100 lakh crore rupee has been committed for 5 years. What role would banks play here? And how do you think this entire process is really going to work?
I think this is a very, great confidence-building measure that, investment as a pipeline, once it becomes more visible, both for the banking system as well as for the investor community, the visibility of the investment pipeline is always a great confidence-building measure. And now, I believe that, as the FM herself was mentioning, these projects will be across sectors. That means commercial sectors, social sectors, and the futuristic sectors. So all put combined, and there will be various commercial models. As we have seen in road, also there is HAM model, there are PPP models. So I believe that it will be across models also. So depending on the commercial viability, the risk management, and all, the banking sector will play its legitimate role. And we will have to see that, because as I told you, there will be a blend of projects right now, right from, full equity to, completely, lender, minimum debt equity to a large equity for highly greenfield projects. So the banking sector, I think, will again come into the forefront in terms of playing its role.
Jayant Mhaiskar as well, CMD at MEP Infrastructure Developers is with us. I request you, Mr. Mahapatra, to stay on the line. Thank you so much for joining in, Mr. Mhaiskar. Quite a few announcements made, that much-needed push for the infrastructure sector, in particular 100 lakh crore infrastructure investment over the next 5 years, and they're ready to front-load investment for projects with a clear completion visibility, a lot for the infrastructure pipeline, and projects against 100 lakh crores committed. How would you read into these moves, which are very much in need of the hour at the moment?
I believe definitely the first reaction would be it's an extremely positive development as far as infrastructure sector is concerned. We all know that this government has made announcement in the last few budgets about specifically going ahead with the ambitious but doable Bharatmala program, which is a part of infrastructure on a larger perspective. With today's specific announcement on the plans giving specific impetus on the lending as well as the total capital outlay being laid out over the next few years on the infrastructure sector, particularly power, railways, irrigation, urban, as well as the infrastructure by way of roads and ports. I think that's definitely a good move. And what is very important at this point of time is, as we all know, the banks are flush with funds, and it is important that the liquidity is maintained well in these spaces, which allows these projects to go ahead on complete on timely basis without any further delays, which only would help reduce the escalation and cost and time overruns.
Mr. Mahapatra, do you really think that this national infra pipeline can ensure time-bound completion of projects? Because there are a lot of stakeholders involved over here. 39% center, 39% state, 22% the private sector. It's going to be a little difficult, don't you think, to come to a consensus?
No, that challenge will always be there. But I think if the pipeline is very good and the project viability is of a credible nature, rather than, because this task force, as the FM told, has held a very wide range of consultations with about 70 stakeholders, which obviously includes different private sector players, different financial institutions, different private equity players, state governments, developers, so on and so forth. So I think based on this, the viability of the project prima facie have been established before they have been showcased to the wider audience for investment. I think this challenge, though always basically present in any kind of initiative of this nature, I think because of this preliminary filtering and scrutiny, the task will be much easier.
Considering you are a lender yourself, what kind of monitoring framework is going to be put in place for these projects?
over the last few years, unlike in overseas markets, where the bankers exit quickly when the projects turn cash flow positive, and the provident funds and the pension funds and the likes pick up the projects, and bankers go for the greenfield projects. In India, banking sector and the financial sector, given its nature, is there to stay for a longer time as compared to a 3 to 5 year exit for the banking sector abroad. In India, probably the banks will have to stay put for probably 7 to 10 years before they can see exit and this thing. So the monitoring mechanism will include, of course, lender independent engineer, the new project management skill build up in the project management verticals of important banks, especially the PSU banks, which are expected because we have not seen many private sector banks getting active in the infrastructure funding sector. So this has to be built up. Plus also, the lenders committees and the joint committees. Here, what we have seen is that wider consultation, as you told, the joint committees and the overseeing mechanisms will come into play. And these are the broader structure, but the specific structures have to be worked out.
Maithili also joining us. Maithili, what are you making of the Finance Minister's announcements today?
Well, it certainly is good that the announcements have finally been made. But remember, this is a budget promise. So it's taken almost, little short of a year for the government to come out with concrete details. And while it is good, I said, to have a pipeline of projects which you have identified where there is some sense of viability, I mean that in much of our infrastructure projects, it's not just the funding, it's also the implementation, it's also the pricing of whether it is power, whether it is water, whether it is roads. Invariably, politics gets mixed up with economics. So I think the government needs to take a holistic view. And as we've seen, public-private partnerships really do not work in this country. Also, as most of the emerging markets, perhaps even the developed countries during their developing phase, it's always the government that has to take the lead in infrastructure. There is no alternative. And in hindsight, it was perhaps very unwise in Indian context to do away with the development financial institutions. So clearly this is a beginning, but I think it's just a beginning, and I don't go overboard and think that it's also going to create that big kickstart for the economy. I think one needs to welcome it, but a cautious welcome.
Mr. Y.D. Murthy of NCC also joining in. Mr. Murthy, a lot of steps that have been taken. So yes, the government is finally, swinging into action with respect to infrastructure. But my colleague Maithili Bushnarmat, our consulting editor, just saying that, public-private partnerships have not worked in the past, and therefore it's not the most viable option. Would you tend to agree?
Yeah, the public-private partnership in the earlier dispensation, the BOT road projects and power projects, it has not worked well at all. And particularly many infrastructure developers suffered a lot because the public-private partnership created a lot of difficulties in implementing the projects. There was no partnership in the first place. It is only anything that goes wrong will fall on the head of the developer, including banks asking for payments on time, which is the right thing. But then because of other payment delays and other things, he is squeezed from all angles. Now, unless this culture improves and an impetus is given for public-private partnerships, like the government agency which is implementing the project should feel that they are also a partner in the project, and they should give the right support mechanism available to the contract developer so that he can execute the project. That understanding between the partners is missing. In fact, there is no partnership at all. It is only a one-way street. So that's why the PPP model failed earlier. And I feel unless there is an improvement in this model, in India to implement these projects through PPP will be very difficult.
Mr. Murthy, unfortunately running completely out of time, but thank you so much for taking the time out. Jayant, good to have you on the show as well. Mr. Mahapatra and Maithili, good to chat with you as always.